In just a few short months, New York State will begin offering medicinal marijuana products to people living with certain illnesses. Well, the New York program will be based on one offered in another state across the country. In part one of our four-part series, The Growing Economy, Capital Tonight's Nick Reisman travels to Minnesota to get a glimpse of how it works there.
Patrick McClellan was running out of hope.
I needed an option other than something that could potentially kill me to try and fight these massive attacks. And that's how I discovered cannabis.
McClellan became one of the first patients in Minnesota to take advantage of the state's new, strictly regulated medical marijuana program. The New York program is one that's expected to be strictly overseen by state officials in Albany, and a governor who can end the medical marijuana program at any time. And it's also based on the Minnesota system. New York, like Minnesota, is limiting the number of illnesses that qualify for medical marijuana prescriptions.
Nothing is a magic bullet. There's not a lot of medicines that cure anything. What we're looking for is an increase in quality of life and an exceptionally good safety profile.
Laura Boltman is Chief Medical Officer at Minnesota Medical Solutions, one of two medical marijuana providers in that state. The company is expanding to New York with plans to build a manufacturing facility in Fulton County. There's no typical medical marijuana patient, so prescriptions vary depending on the illness and the symptoms that are being treated. THC is the ingredient most commonly associated with marijuana. It's the chemical that can make users hungry, high, and even paranoid. But in many medical marijuana prescriptions, the more important ingredient is the chemical CBD, a more subtle pain reliever that can address nerve pain and muscle spasms, but does not have the same effect as THC. The drug can be ingested through ordinary-looking pills or in liquid form through a dropper. And then there's the cost. Patients say it's not prohibitive, but a prescription isn't cheap in Minnesota since patients have been slow to sign up in order to qualify.
There are healthcare providers out there that just are not certifying patients, and again, because it's a volunteer program, we don't require that they have to. So there has been some bottleneck for patients to try and find a healthcare provider that would certify their condition for them to be a patient.
Regulators say the hesitation from some providers to write medical marijuana prescriptions is because some remain concerned about getting involved in the industry at all.
Philosophically, the healthcare providers, medical cannabis has not been in their pharmacopoeia and medical training for years.
And with the program here in Minnesota more than 12 months up and running, patients and their parents say that it's best to do your homework in New York.
Do your research, read all you can, get educated so you understand the medicine.
Beth Huntley's 3.5-year-old daughter Harlow is being treated with medicine made from marijuana in order to stem the symptoms from the rare neurological disease she has. Almost immediately, the results were apparent.
It's meant the world to us to see our daughter. She's literally coming to life. She's enjoying life more. She feels better, you can tell. She's more vocal, she's more loving. And so to have your daughter stuck in her brain and herself, and then to all of a sudden emerge because of this medicine that's a healing plant, that has very few side effects, is just the most incredible experience. And to have fought for something so hard and then to be lucky enough to see results is truly a miracle.
At first, it's a surreal sight, and in some cases, smell. Thousands of marijuana plants of different sizes growing in a greenhouse in rural Minnesota. And it's all perfectly legal.
If you had told me 18 months ago that I was going to be involved in this business, I would say there's absolutely no possibility of that.
Kyle Kingsley is the CEO of Minnesota Medical Solutions. Kingsley's company is one of 4 approved for licenses to bring the medical marijuana business to New York. In Minnesota, he employs 39 people, making his business a small one. And he doesn't expect New York's medical marijuana economy to be an especially large one, at least in the beginning.
So New York obviously has large potential moving ahead, but it's going to be a small market there initially. There's going to be, so it'll take some time for physicians to adopt this. It'll take some time for patients to adopt this.
Step into Kingsley's clinic in downtown Minneapolis, and you'll find an ordinary-looking office. It's a major selling point for state lawmakers in Minnesota, as well as community members concerned with a business that is distributing medical marijuana.
We're looking for a clean clinical experience for patients that's going to reassure patients, the public, and the policymakers that this is a different type of model.
But in New York, not everyone is pleased with the idea of a dispensary coming to their community. The Suffolk County town of Riverhead, about 90 minutes from New York City, Town officials there are expressing reservations with a proposed dispensary to be built by Columbia Care NY. Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan says a balance should be struck to consider local concerns.
If we need to make accommodations to address local concerns, I'm sure we can do that, but if you look at where we are compared to other states across the country, I think it would be fair to say progressive, but we didn't open the gate so that everyone can run in.
Like in New York, Minnesota's medical cannabis program is limited to those with severe illnesses. The growing facility itself for Kingsley's company is nearly an hour's drive outside of Minneapolis in a rural corner of the state.
We kind of take the sexiness out of the cannabis industry and make it very practical and medical, clinical.
Kingsley's plans for New York include building a facility 4 times the size of the Minnesota greenhouse in Fulton County at the site of the former Tryon Juvenile Detention Center. And it's a deeply scientific model, with the end of the assembly line producing a product that looks very little like the marijuana most people would know.
The real magic, the real difficulties are after you already have the plant, and that's where we really shine.
New York's medical marijuana industry will be larger in scope than the Minnesota program it is based on. Still, it is unclear how many patients will ultimately take advantage of a prescription drug that is being limited to a pool of the severely ill. In Minnesota, Nick Reisman, Time Warner Cable News. New York's medical marijuana program was approved after a lengthy public and private debate in the halls of the state capitol. But it took a lot of convincing of skeptics.
Many people thought that the only reason people wanted access to medical marijuana or marijuana for medicinal reasons was because they just wanted another way to get high. That was the biggest misconception.
The measure was approved in 2014, but only after significant lobbying of one major skeptic, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
I believe he said originally that he saw the benefit, but he thought that the risks outweighed the benefits. And so with him, it was also an education process.
Legislation that was ultimately approved gives Cuomo broad authority over the state's medical marijuana program, which is due to formally go online for patients in January.
I think the discretion that the governor exercises is pretty extraordinary, and unfortunately he could have used that discretion to make a program that increased patient access and helped alleviate more suffering in the state.
The latitude granted the governor in the program isn't the only aspect that doesn't sit well with some advocates who lobbied for the measure.
Medical marijuana program that's being implemented is incredibly narrow and restrictive. I would say one of the narrowest in the country. And unfortunately, that's going to leave a lot of patients behind.
5 applicants have been selected to dispense medical cannabis around the state by January. The application process itself was conducted with little fanfare and relatively out of the public view. And some advocates remain bitterly disappointed an emergency program wasn't set up to treat seriously ill children.
In the 13 months now since the bill was signed into law, 4 children have died just affiliated with our campaign alone.
The Cuomo administration did seek a federal waiver to import out-of-state medical-grade marijuana. They were turned down in a letter by the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, the incoming medical marijuana firms aren't paying much attention to the political debate in New York.
I don't think it would change anything. We're not policymakers. Our goal is to execute on the current law.
Likewise, the application process, which Minnesota Health Solutions CEO Kyle Kingsley says didn't involve much internal jockeying.
We took a different approach. We didn't do the political route. We really looked to put together a merit-based application in New York.
Only the 43 companies that sought the 5 licenses in New York did commit to varying levels of lobbying, spending thousands of dollars in the process.
We know who the applicants were. We know who the winners were. So I don't know what more transparency, could be expected.
But what was the trick to getting medical marijuana passed in the first place? New York certainly is not the first state to do so. In Minnesota, which the New York law broadly based its own program on, advocates were the patients themselves, and they encountered their own frustrations.
Unfortunately, in politics, people don't really look at evidence. They will look at politics. The same way here in Minnesota, a lot of the conditions that were chosen were not chosen because of science, they were chosen because of politics.
Nick Reisman, Time Warner Cable News. By law, New York's medical marijuana program is due to be up and running for patient prescriptions early next year. But what's the future of the program after that? Will enough patients sign up? Will doctors be willing to issue prescriptions?
Right now, I anticipate there will definitely be patients who want this therapy, and we'll have more information in the months to come.
New York's medical marijuana program is limiting prescriptions for the drug to the severely ill. It's a potentially limited pool of people, making the price of a prescription potentially costly.
Obviously, we want to make sure this is affordable because if this is a therapy and it can help people, and we'll see where we go with that, it'll be very important to make sure that everyone has access to it.
Marijuana is edging closer to widespread acceptance in the United States, but Minnesota's medical marijuana program remains relatively modest. Insurance carriers, too, have been reluctant to cover it.
Medicare, Medicaid patients can't get it. Veterans can't get it through their veteran insurance. So I think it would be a while before insurance companies would follow that path.
Meanwhile, it's unknown how many healthcare providers will be willing to prescribe the drug. Health Commissioner Howard Zucker says he is reaching out to doctors now before the program launches for patients.
So I have reached out to the pediatricians, family practice physicians, the internal medicine physicians, and others. My goal there is to have them also reach out to their physicians, and I will also continue to reach out over the course of the next couple months.
And as for the number of illnesses that qualify for the program, Zucker isn't ruling out exercising the health department's authority and adding more afflictions to what can be covered.
We have the diseases that we've listed, and as we move forward, as more information comes forward, I will look at that, the team will review it, and decide what we want to add on as necessary.
Each state is indeed different when it comes to medical marijuana and marijuana policy in general. However, the federal government is pretty clear on the issue. Marijuana is a Schedule I drug, and that means the medical marijuana program in New York, or in any state for that matter, could be shut down by the federal government really at any moment. However, supporters of medical marijuana insist that won't be happening.
It's possible, but I think unlikely. The Obama administration has been very clear in several directives from the Department of Justice that they're not going to pursue medical marijuana programs that are well regulated. And one thing you can say about the New York program is it's got plenty of regulation.
Senator Dianne Savino, a key lawmaker who pushed for the medical marijuana law, says it's up to the presidential candidates to stake out clear positions now on the issue.
You have it in 23 states, with a couple of more states considering it in the ballot options right now, or the legislative process. We are at the tipping point in this country. So anyone who wants to lead this nation cannot pretend that medical marijuana isn't a reality that they're going to have to deal with.
The Department of Health, meanwhile, says the program remains on schedule to launch by January. A spokesman says if necessary, the department may authorize additional companies to become registered organizations. In Albany, Nick Reisman, Time Warner Cable News.